Frederick Douglass is not my real name. A fugitive slave. What year I was born, I do not know. My mother and I were separated when I was still too young to know her as my mother. As a child, I knew indescribable hunger. I remember fighting with yard dogs for scraps of food, thrown away as garbage. I have often been utterly astonished to hear persons who speak of the singing of the slave as evidence of his contentment and happiness. This is a terrible mistake. The songs of the slave represent the sorrows of his heart. I've sat on Kennard's Wharf at the foot of Philpott Street in Baltimore, and I've seen men and women chained and put on a ship to go to New Orleans.
Frederick.
Still hear their cries.
Frederick, it's so early in the morning.
I'm just going through some old files and notes. I might find something interesting for the women's conference this afternoon.
They're not expecting you to make a formal speech. Will you not even have breakfast?
I won't be long. Just want to be prepared.
Get that before sunup.
I won't be long.
Very good, Fred. Go on.
G, H, I, J, K.
What in God's name do you think you're doing?
You didn't mean any harm.
If you give a nigger an inch, he will take a mile. If you teach that nigger how to read, there would be no keeping him. It would forever ruin him to be a slave. We carried you here to take care of Thomas. You'll learn a trade when you're bigger. Ain't no need for you to be reading, boy. No need at all.
I understand, dear. I'll see to it that it's not allowed to be near any more books.
There's nothing more needs saying.
I have little hope in the freedom of the slave by peaceful means. More than 2 centuries of slavery has placed the slave holders beyond the reach of moral and humane consideration.
Get up!
The only penetrable point of a tyrant is fear of death.
So you mean to resist me, a scoundrel? Yes, sir.
Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and will. The limits of tyrants are prescribed by the endurance of those whom they oppress.
Anna, I shall not marry you as a slave.
Then I reckon you should go up north.
Words come easily. If I'm caught this time, Lord knows what might happen.
But you off the plantation now, Fred. They'll patrol us to stop you in Baltimore. You learned yourself a trade in a shipyard. There's work for you up there, and freedom. I saved up some. I got some belongings I can sell. Enough for the New York train.
Anna.
See, Frederick Douglass has joined us. Please, come up and share your thoughts with us.
Mr. Coffin, I'm not very used to speaking like this.
Just speak, Fred. What's the matter?
Frederick Douglass is not my real name. I'm a fugitive slave. What year I was born, I do not know. My mother and I were separated when I was still
I resolved then
really
that
know.
whatever power I had should be devoted to the freeing of my race.
My friends, have we been listening to a thing, a piece of property, or to a man? Will you allow this man to be carried back into slavery?
We'll get him started here in Massachusetts until he becomes accustomed to traveling and speaking. Mr. Douglas.
I don't believe you've met Mr. Garrison.
I'm honored, sir.
I was deeply moved by your address. You have a great gift, Mr. Douglas.
Thank you, Mr. Garrison.
You say you never had any formal schooling?
No, sir.
Not even after you escaped?
No, sir. I've been teaching myself ever since I was a youngster.
Amazing.
Impressive. Really is.
Mr. Douglas, Mr. Collins and Mr. Raymond and I were just discussing your becoming an agent for the society. Traveling as a lecturer, if you will.
Mr. Garrison, I've hardly the ability to speak.
Oh, nonsense. You speak with full conviction and authority.
If there is no struggle, there is no progress. The struggle may be a moral one, or it may be a physical.
Within or without the Union, slavery must fall. The long-crushed Negro must rise. Ethiopia. What to the American slave is your 4th of July? There's not a nation on the earth guilty of practices more shocking and bloody than are the people of the United States at this very hour. Kill the nigger!
Fred, no, Fred!
No, Senator Calhoun! No! Slavery cannot last. Melancholy as the truth may be to the dealers in human flesh. No constitutional change. No legislative enactments. No human contract nor agreement can save the accursed system of human bondage from the death and decay to which God and nature have doomed it.
Bravo! Bravo!
Who is it?
Garrison.
Come in.
I must speak to your father.
Garrison.
Sorry to disturb you like this. I should have known it. The very thing we were afraid of has happened. But we never dreamed the reaction would be this great. Your book, my dear fellow. You've named your masters. You've marked yourself for the fugitive catchers, my dear man.
I have no choice. My effectiveness as a speaker was diminished. The enemies of our cause claim that I'm a fraud, that no slave could be so literate.
You've talked of taking our message to Great Britain.
Yes, sir.
This seems a propitious time for such a journey, giving time for this trouble to blow over.
Frederick, Mr. Garrison may be right.
But Anna, that means I'll have to leave you and the children for a while.
But you still have your freedom.
So we can't persuade you to stay in England.
It's been over a year. I must go back. It's not an easy decision. The British people have taken me to their hearts.
Have you any plans, Frederick?
Oh, yes. When I get back, there'll be speeches, more speeches, meetings and more meetings. But, Julia, I'm thinking of starting a newspaper. I want to call it the North Star.
If you do, I'd like to help. I could raise funds, sell
It would be a most
subscriptions here in
humanitarian
England.
deed, Miss Richardson. But I fear the reaction of our abolitionists at home.
Why should anyone object?
Do you agree, Mr. Garrison?
But let's speak to Mr. Douglas.
The more that's known about slavery, the better. Don't you agree, Frederick?
Frederick, my sister and I have hired an agent who has been in contact with you all. He is willing to sell you.
Sell? To you?
Well, as soon as the transaction is completed, we can give you your freedom.
Freedom. Freedom.
Welcome home, Papa.
Hey, Rosetta. Mama. I like this. That's good, Dad.
Thank you very much.
Rosetta! Please lock the door, please.
Yes, Papa.
Papa, it's Mrs. Tubman.
Harriet! Oh, my goodness. So good to see you.
Frederick.
Rosetta, lock the door.
Ooh, a warm stove is sure a welcome sight.
Harriet, this is my friend from England, Julia Griffiths. She's been helping to straighten out the paper's finances.
I'm so honored, Mrs. Tubman. I've heard so much about you. Even in England, your work is known.
I'm just an old lady that loves doing a lot of walking in the great outdoors. Most times at night.
And she's fond of bloodhounds, too.
Wherever I go, I hear folks talking about John Brown.
Brown, we're indebted to you for your deeds in Kansas. They say you freed over 100 slaves.
Several hundred. We escaped just ahead of the, shall we say, friendly posse. Douglas, my words are for your ears only.
What do you mean by that?
I intend to seize Harpers Ferry. I want you at my side.
Seize the town?
Yes. First, we'll capture the army Oscar. Then we'll hold the leading citizens hostage until the slaves are freed.
But don't you see, you can't fight the entire United States Army alone. You and your men are overwhelmingly outnumbered. They'll annihilate you.
But this mission will arouse all America. It will force the people to take action against this damnable institution.
John, you know I have supported and will continue to support you in all of your other efforts. But my dear friend, this scheme is doomed to failure. This is the wrong place. This is suicide, man.
Whether we live, die, this deed must be done.
Shields, for the love of God.
Mr. Douglas, I believe I'll go with the old man.
Because of events in Harpers Ferry, the press and much of the public have declared John Brown to be truly mad. But he is not. John Brown is a man who simply believes the Declaration of Independence to be true, and the Bible to be a guide to human conduct. The future will write John's epitaph,
upon the hearts of a people freed from slavery. Like Samson, he laid his hands upon the pillars of this great national temple of cruelty and blood. And when he fell, that temple began to crumble to its final doom.
Mr. Douglas, a word with you, please. Come, walk with me, sir.
My name is Ferry. I'm a telegraph operator. I have in my pocket a wire that just came for the United States Marshal. It orders him to place you under arrest.
Arrest? What are the charges?
Conspiracy and accessory before the fact of murder. They plan to extradite you to Virginia to stand trial with John Brown.
But...
Mr. Douglas, I am a friend of your cause. I know that Virginia justice will surely see you go to the gallows. I'll hang on to this message until you're safely out of town.
I have to leave for Britain next month. It's been planned for some time.
Mr. Douglas, go at once.
I'll make for Canada and sail from there.
And go quickly, Mr. Douglas. And Godspeed. I must get back to my work.
Frederick, the women on the council know you've been fighting their cause for nearly half a century.
Yes. It's the men I'm trying to reach at that meeting. Many of them still aren't convinced. Women must have the right to vote.
Really think you can change their minds?
Perhaps. I believe I've changed a few in my time.
Oh. Frederick.
Let us stop the war on the soil upon which it originated, and among the rebels and traitors who originated.
Yes.
Organize yourselves into societies and communities. Purchase arms for yourselves. Learn how to use them.
Yes. Yes.
Let us not only be ready when called, but let us cast about for the opportunity to strike for the freedom of the slave, and the rights of human nature. For we shall be called, and we must be ready.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for consenting to this visit.
Mr. Douglas, your reputation precedes you. We appreciate your efforts in recruiting so many Negro troops. Now, tell me your concern.
To put it bluntly, Mr. President, our Negro soldiers are receiving inferior arms, inferior training, lower pay, and in other ways are being unfairly treated by the Union Army, and when captured by the Confederates, are murdered in cold blood. Mr. President, the Negro soldier is willing to fight and die in this great war. But he must receive some sign from this administration that he simply isn't exchanging one form of oppression for another.
Mr. Douglas. If this administration goes too far, we will bring down upon ourselves all of the hatred that is felt toward the Negro. This would greatly hinder our ability to successfully conclude this war. For we, both of us, have much to gain in this regard.
Let us pray that this family is never separated again.
Well, what happens now, Papa? Now that our people are free?
There are papers that supposedly set us free, Louis. But in my heart, I fear the danger that the victory that you and Charles and 170,000 other black men fought to gain will be lost.
But, Papa, President Johnson says that...
I fear Andrew Johnson is no friend of the Negro people.
Frederick, you mean we've been suffering all these trials for all these years for nothing?
Without the vote, liberty's a mockery. The Negro will no longer be a slave to an individual master. He will be a slave to society and at the mercy of the mob.
It is the spirit of hate, spirit of murder, spirit that would burn a family in their beds. But one thing I know, and that is, there is no middle ground for us. We must either have all the rights of American citizens, or we must be exterminated. For we shall never again be slaves.
Do you like it, Anna?
It's beautiful. Maybe a mite too grand.
Well, President Hayes wouldn't have the United States Marshal for the District of Columbia living in a log cabin.
Mr. Lincoln lived in a log cabin.
How do you feel?
About the same. What's wrong, Papa?
Nothing, my dear. Everything's fine.
What is it, Fred?
I met with President Garfield today. First, he thanked me for supporting the party. Then he informed me I'm no longer the United States Marshal. I'm to be appointed the Recorder of Deeds. Glorified clerk.
Lincoln never took a step backwards, but every administration since has. Papa, you're not going to take that job, are you?
Is there a choice? Our people's pride demands that a Negro holds some position in the government of the United States. I must put their battered pride ahead of my own.
You've done the right thing, Fred. You usually do.
Papa. Papa, Mr. Tubman is here.
Harriet!
Frederick!
My goodness. My goodness. What a pleasant surprise.
I can't stay but a moment, Fred. But I couldn't come to Washington without stopping by to say hello.
It's been so long, Harriet. It brings back such pleasant memories. You know, Harriet, most of what I've done in my life has been in public. But you've labored in a private way. I've had the applause of the crowds, while your greater deeds have been known by only a few trembling, scared, footsore bondsmen. Midnight sky and silent stars, witnesses to your heroism.
Old age sure ain't tarnished that silver tongue of yours. You must be terribly lonely, Frederick. With Anna gone and all the children grown up now.
Lord. Harriet, Anna was the anchor of my life for 40 years. But I have Rosetta, Charles, Louis, Fred, and I have my work.
I hope this is hot enough for you.
Thank you, Rosetta. Miss Pitts,
Yes, Mr. Douglas?
do you have the file on the Ramsey properties?
I'll get it.
Thank you. Miss Pitts,
Yes, Mr. Douglas.
I understand you enjoy bars, is that so?
Very much, Mr. Douglas.
Perhaps you wouldn't mind accompanying me to the concert tonight.
I'd be happy to. But I'll have to get back to my correspondence.
Papa, I speak for the entire family. How could you do such a terrible thing?
Rosetta, is it so terrible for an old man to seek comfort of a loving wife as the evening of his days descend upon him?
But you are not just anybody, Papa. You are the leader of our people. What kind of example is this? If you insist on marrying at your age, why turn your back on our women to marry this hussy?
That's nonsense, Rosetta. Black or white, male or female. We all have the right to follow the convictions of our hearts. If I were not to marry Helen simply because she happens to be white, go to my grave a self-accused and self-convicted moral coward. Rosetta, please, don't desert me.
Oh, Papa, really?
Rosetta, please.
Absolutely. I just found he had.
It's a wonderful speech.
Wonderful.
Here he is.
Oh, where? Oh, there he is. Oh, there he is. Oh. May I have your signature? Thank you. May I have your autograph?
I really enjoyed your speech, sir. It was very moving. Thank you. May I have your autograph, sir?
Thank you for those wonderful words, Mr. Douglas.
Thank you. Thank you.
They mean a lot to all of us.
Mr. Douglas, how would you sum up your involvement in the women's cause?
When I ran away from slavery, it was for myself. When I advocated emancipation, it was for my people. But when I stood up for the rights of women, self was out of the question. And I found a little nobility in the act.
Well said.
Hello, Mr. Douglas.
Hello.
I'm Martin Andrew. I heard you speak last week at Mountain Olive.
Oh, yes. That was an inspiring affair.
Can I talk to you for a moment, Mr. Douglas?
Well, Martin, I've just left one meeting. I barely have time for supper before I have to go off to another. Why don't you stop back by tomorrow afternoon? I'll have more than just a moment.
But I just have one question.
All right, just one.
But, sir, you lived in the old days when our people were slaves, and in the new times, both. But it seems like all those rights that we're supposed to have won are being taken away from us. What advice would you have for a young fella like me who wants all people to live in liberty and justice?
Agitate, Martin. Agitate. Agitate. Agitate.
If there is no struggle, there's no progress. The struggle may be a moral one, or it may be a physical one, and it may be both moral and physical, but it must be a struggle. Power concedes nothing without a demand. I have little hope in the freedom of the slave by peaceful means. The limits of time more than 2 centuries by the endurance place the slave holder there.
Why did you invite me here to speak on this occasion? To mock me?
What to the American slave is your 4th of July?
Within or without the Union, slavery must fall. The long-crushed Negro must rise.
More than all the other days of the year.
No!
Justice and cruelty. No slavery cannot last. Melancholy
The old
of the
slave
slave
owners
baby.
used to represent the slaves. The rich landowners of other countries represent the poor. And the men in our country. It's hardly necessary for me to say, after what I've already said, that I'm a radical woman suffrage man.
Slavery is the common enemy of all mankind. One of those monsters of darkness, the light of truth is death.
Stepped upon the free soil of Massachusetts.
Let us never forget
Well, I took
that justice to the Negro is safety to the nation.